Today, we're sharing our thoughts on how to win no matter if you have the size advantage or the speed advantage. So let's go ahead and dive right in. All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Pass First podcast. My name is Augie Johnston. I'm here with my co-host, Alex Engel. Alex, we're talking about size versus speed today. What are the biggest advantages of having the size advantage?
Definitely being able to get the ball inside and score around the basket. I think obviously that's the first one that comes to most people's mind. And I think that's obviously a lot easier when you have a bigger player or multiple bigger players. The second part I would say is rebounding on both ends, cleaning up the boards defensively and making sure they don't get second chance points. And then for yourself on the offensive end, creating second chance opportunities for, better, whether it's an easy layup or a kick out for a wide open three. I think those are some of the main things that come to mind when I think of the size advantage. Maybe the third one I would throw in there is a little bit more of an ability to close out or block some shots, get some deflections when you have a little bit more size, and just, jump those passing lanes with your length. So I think those are the three things that I think of when I think of the size advantage.
I totally agree with that. When you think of the kind of the main things, like the most important things in basketball, like turnovers are a big one. So using your height to get deflections, I think, like you said, makes a lot of sense. And the rebounding one too, right? So I think that's why there's a premium for height in the game of basketball, because definitely for rebounding. Rebounding to me is probably the most important thing, then turnovers to me. And so, yeah, getting that height and winning that battle every game is huge. Other ones that kind of popped into my head, man, were rim protection, right? Rim protection. If you got some size out there, your help defense should be amazing, right? When they drive and you got a big guy or even a tall guard or whatever coming over for help side, that is going to be a lot better than like a small guard. Like small guards on help side, I feel like I should probably take charges, but maybe we'll save that. So let's talk a little bit about defensive strategy then, Alex. Let's say, you got a whole new team that comes in, you got a bunch of height this next year or whatever year it is. What are kind of some defensive strategies you're going to use to maximize your ability with height?
I guess one of my questions would be, if we're talking about a team with size, is that necessarily negating their ability to contain, and that type of stuff? That would be one of the first things that maybe I would look at, right? Like, how well do we contain with this size? Can guys or girls guard one-on-one or not? And so I think some of the things I would do is try to put my players in a position to be able to guard in the best way possible, because I think if you have a team where you have a lot of size and they don't move their feet well, then you might have to maybe think of different ways to play defensively than just your typical man-to-man, right? Like, you may have to look at a zone. I'm not necessarily someone that loves zone defense, but if you want to go full Syracuse and recruit a bunch of lanky guys to your team, and use that to your advantage, a good zone defense with a lot of height, I think, can be very advantageous. You can run things like 1-3-1s, just different types of zones that I think can be effective. And then defensively, in man-to-man, I should say, I think another thing that you can consider, which I don't necessarily love this, I'm more of a sideline baseline guy, and I think you are as well, but I've heard the concept of force middle when you have a really good big that can paint protect. And if you've got multiple guys that can paint protect and you're like, hey, if one gets in foul trouble, I can just throw another guy in there and just force everyone to the rim all the time. Maybe that's something else you do to try and mix it up. I've never had that luxury to try that, but it's something that I've thought about. Like, man, if I had 3 or 4 solid bigs, maybe I would switch it up, that sideline baseline look, and try and force middle to see if I could just get him to go into the shot blocker over and over again.
That kind of sparked an idea in my head, like when you have size, especially if you have one guy that has a lot of size, right? Maybe you have a pretty tall team, but you have one particular player, 6'8", 6'7" in high school. That's a pretty good size. You can use them as a rim protector by switching everything out, kind of, right? Like they can switch and stay low. If someone comes to set a down screen on them, they'll just switch. They're staying low. Now they're guarding somebody else, but they're still at the rim. And then the other thing, like you said, the zone, you can do that as well, right? You have this one big, maybe they can't guard, maybe you're playing against another team that's got 5 guards. They're playing with 5 guards that are quick and can shoot, and they're going to space you out. Then you might need to go a little zone or something and keep that big right in the middle. Now he's never going to leave the paint, and he can grab rebounds and stuff like that. So, yeah, I think traditionally, for this conversation, you can kind of assume in a lot of these instances that we're talking about size with a little bit slower feet, maybe a little bit more traditional posts type players on the floor. And when we're talking about speed, we're talking about, you got at least 4 guards on the court that are quick and can, move up and down. And Okay, so we talked a little bit about defense. Any other final defensive thoughts when you have height?
One other thing when we talk about the zone, because as you talked about, if you've got a big that cannot guard another smaller player, right? The fear with running a zone is, well, if they've got 4 or 5 guards that can shoot, now you could be in trouble, right? But I think one thing that you can maybe do if you have a lankier, bigger team, even if it's just one player, that this is harder to do. But I think with a bigger zone, you can extend out more and know that you can protect a little bit better than maybe, a lot of zones kind of pack it in, and you can extend out and still kind of protect the 3-point line because you have that extra length. So just something to consider. Depending on what you got, you can extend the zone farther than just the 3-point line and make it still somewhat difficult to get those open threes.
Yeah, I think that was a great point. I think making sure, if traditional 2-3, right, you have that big stay home at the basket. Then no matter what, even if those baseline guys are cutting or whatever, and there's guys going high low on the block, right, and that's what you kind of worry about when you extend those bottom guys and stuff, right? You're leaving that high low open a little bit more. But if your big stays low, then I think that's a great strategy to clog it up even more. And, also another thing that popped in my head when you were talking is if you have multiple bigs, I think you can put one up top of a 3-2 or a 1-3-1 or like a 1-2-2 3/4 court trap. And that's real dangerous to put somebody with some length out there, like you mentioned earlier with the deflections and stuff. So, all right, let's move on from the defense. I think we talked a lot about bigs on defense. Let's talk a little bit about offense now. Okay, you said you can dump the ball in. What kind of offense are you running? Are you changing on your offense maybe if you have some height? It's hard. It's pretty general to say height. Let's just say you got one really good big. Let's say you got two really good bigs. Okay, because that's a little bit more untraditional, I would say.
I definitely am going to change my offense. And I think that's one of the first things when you talk about any of this stuff is, as a coach, you have to be willing to change your offense and adapt it to what you have, right? If you're a 4-out, 1-in type of coach or a 5-out coach and you've got two great bigs and they're your two best players, you're probably not going to run 5-out, right? Don't force that big to go to the perimeter and take away all their ability. So find something different. And so for me, I like high-low looks. I think high-low looks are great. With bigs, obviously, against zone, they're really good. Against man, sometimes it can be a little harder, but you can still do it. Some of the other things I like is a lot of European ball screen action. So pick and roll, continuous ball screen action. I think that's great because not only can you get the guards giving the ball to the bigs, but I've had some teams where I've been lucky enough to have two pretty good 4s and 5s, and on that pass from the slot to the other slot, which usually goes from the guard to big, that big can see over the top, and they'll get a low, the other big will get a low seal, and they'll just lob it over the top and get a score. So that stuff I love. Yeah, I think those are probably the main two. I'm sure there's other stuff I'm not thinking about. Any other offenses that popped into your mind?
Man, you got me hyped on the European ball screen offense. I think that's a great call. That's great when you got two bigs. I think a lot of coaches love that. And man, I really think I should consider adding that as a second offense and stuff. But yeah, so the other one that kind of popped into my head is and I ran this one season, my first season. It's the Kansas high-low offense. It's almost like a 3-out, 2-in offense, where you pass to the wing, point guard cuts to either corner, and then you imagine 3-out, 2-in. You got one big that flashes high, basically gets a catch, and they're looking high-low right there. There's a lot more to it, some ball screens and stuff. But yeah, it's just literally high-low, swing it, screen away. And it's a good offense. The way that we ran it was kind of very continuity, kind of like A, B, C, D. It wasn't too motion-like. And, these days I'm not a big fan of 3-out, 2 spacing, although essentially it does go 4-out. But that's a good offense. And then I'm just remembering all these offenses now. There's this one from this D2 women's school called Ashland, and they are a very good Division II school, like a powerhouse. And they run this 2-big high-low ball screen offense where you got a big right at the point, a big right underneath the rim, essentially. And people are coming off that. It's roll and replace, essentially. You're coming off that high big with the dribble. She's rolling. Other one's replacing. So, yeah. Anyways, those are kind of the X's and O's are the actual offenses. Let's talk a little bit more about, strategy. I don't know. You got some size. What else are you doing besides, let's say you got some big guards too. How can we incorporate that?
I think with bigger guards, one of the things is hopefully if you have some bigger guards, maybe they've got some post skill, or if not, you can definitely teach them a couple post moves. And I think taking advantage of smaller guards, I think that's something that's highly underutilized, right? And I think back to the days of, I don't know, like 1990s, early 2000s basketball, where you'd see like guards getting on the block, right? And that I feel like that doesn't happen that often anymore. But getting a big guard and putting them on the block with a small guard, because most guards are not great post defenders. So even if you've just got one or two post moves, you can figure out something like that. Just using their length and their size to create mismatches. I guess if you're talking just specifically having a bigger guard, because one of the things I was going to say was you can get those kind of guard to big screens and try and get switches where you get one of your own bigs on a guard, right? But you could do that with any size, whether you have a big guard or a small guard, and you can always do a guard to big screen, right? So I don't know if that's unique to a bigger guard, but yeah, I don't know. My first thought is you can definitely get them on the block, and I think one other advantage that when you have a bigger guard is if they can shoot and they've got that height, they can get their shot off easier. So they don't need as much time because they can shoot over a lot of those smaller guards, right? Like if you got like a 6'5" shooting guard, they get the ball in their hands, their closeout space is a lot shorter, compared, or I guess longer compared to another player who's 5'10". Like if that 5'10" guy catches, they got to get it up quick, where the 6'5" guy can kind of take his time because he knows he's got the height to launch it.
Yeah, no, those are all good points. I think like if you have big guards too, like if you can get them somehow to go off 2 feet, like near the rim, and they have the size advantage, and all your guards have the size advantage, and you're able to just get in there and get 2 feet and go up, then you're going to get a lot of high percentage shots. Maybe, not settling for the threes and making sure that we are very aggressive and we're driving the ball, getting into 2 feet or whatever in the paint. It's kind of like what you said when you got a taller guard, you're going to be able to finish over, whether you got to shoot a tough layup or even like a little spin move, fadeaway jumper or something against a smaller player. And not that I love that shot, but it's like, you're going to get that off and they're not going to be able to contest it. So the only other thing I wanted to kind of mention too was the offensive rebounding, right? Like if you have size, then you should be telling your players to like punish them on the offensive boards, like win the game on the offensive boards, I think. So yeah, any other final thoughts on offense?
I was actually gonna say offensive rebounding was the other one. If you can get a team to crash hard, that's a great point because you can get a lot of second chance opportunities off of that.
Yeah, and maybe playing a little bit of bully ball if you got size, because normally you'll have weight then on them. So yeah, okay, that is talking about size. Let's talk about speed now. This is a little less obvious, I would say. If you don't have the size, you might have to master plan some way to win. But how can a faster team create advantages? And let's talk about defense. You're on defense.
Number one thing, because to my head, is press. Like put pressure on the ball all game long, fly around, make things difficult, be the pest. With when you don't have as much height, you're not going to be able to get in the passing lanes quite as well. But if you can get other teams and make them put their head down and make bad decisions, like it doesn't matter, they'll turn it over. So I think that's definitely one of the main things. I think because you're quicker, you can rotate better, so you can stick teams in man if you've got good defensive principles, and you should be able to stay in front and force a lot of contested shots. Yes, you're going to give up some rebounding. Yes, you're going to give up sometimes where a bigger player is going to shoot over you and it's not going to be a great contest, but I think it's an advantage to be able to move your feet. We've talked about this in the past. I think that quickness might be like the number one athletic skill in basketball. Like I know jumping is up there as well, but I don't know. If you can't stay in front of somebody because they're so quick, it's like, how do you guard them? Where if you can leap, no matter how well you can leap, if I put my body in front of you, I'm still going to be able to limit you to an extent. But lightning quickness is, I think, to me, the number one athletic ability on the court. So yeah, that's just some of the things that I think of defensively.
Yeah, I think those are all good points. Staying in front, I think, is a huge one. I mean, that is an advantage that most people don't think about, but staying in front is big. And of course, pressure, like you said in the press, speeding them up. You got a team that's kind of slower, or maybe not as much ball handling on the other team, and you're shorter. Like speed them up, force the turnovers, win that battle, right? You might not win the rebound battle if you don't have size, but you could win the turnover battle for sure because. I guess we're not talking about offense yet, but you could take care of the ball better, and then you can force more turnovers for sure. But yeah, okay. I think that's good for defense. Maybe steal the ball, take charges. Okay, that's a big one when you're smaller, is taking charges. And those are huge plays. And it's crazy how you see some teams that are so professional and so good at taking charges. I need to study that a little bit more because my team is not like professionals at that stuff. They'll try a little bit here and there, and I appreciate the effort, but like we're not getting a bunch every game like some teams are. Have you ever ran across a team like that? Just a little sidebar.
I may have even mentioned it. I don't know if I'm making this up, but a few years ago, remember we had Jeff Barakoff on here and Pacifica Christian, and I got to watch them play when they came up here for the Christmas Classic, and they were like just taking charges all over the court. I mean, it was just crazy. Like I couldn't believe it. It was like multiple charges every game, and the bench would get all fired up, and you could just see like the whole bench was just ready for it, and it was definitely ingrained into their culture. And I'm like, dang, I don't know what he does to get them taking charges like that, but he's obviously they're practicing it, otherwise it wouldn't be that easy for them.
Yeah, so there you go. If you know that year to year, typically your team is a little bit shorter. Like, why aren't you implementing a system into whatever you're doing to develop that skill? Because it is something that you develop and implement that, because taking charges is forcing a turnover. There's no shot and all the benefits of taking charges, but it's huge for shorter teams. So, okay, let's move on and talk a little bit about offense now. You got a team that's quick, maybe not the tallest team, but they're quick and skilled. Like, what are your advantages? What are you trying to teach your team to do?
Number one is you're trying to get paint touches as much as possible. Like, you're trying to spread the other team out, get into the paint, get kickouts for wide open jump shots. I think get as much movement as you can. I think the more movement you can get on offense, especially if you're quicker, it's going to be hard for them to stick with you, whether they're trying to switch or whether they're hedging things or even just trying to interchange on screens. Like, that type of stuff is difficult when you have a team that's constantly moving and you can move at a very fast pace. I think another thing is just moving at a fast pace on a made basket. Like, I'm sure you've done this, and maybe you guys already do it as a team, but you've run across teams where like you score and they got the ball and they're going down the other court already, and you're like, holy crap, like we barely just turned around and they're coming down our throats already trying to get a layup. So when you got a fast team, I think that's an advantage, is just playing fast in general. So yeah, those are some of the main things if we're just talking about kind of concepts, and not getting too much into the continuity of an offense or anything like that.
You hit it on the head, right? Transition offense is the main advantage. Getting up and down, playing fast, getting wide open threes, even in transition. A lot of the highest percentage shots that you can take are in transition because you're playing with an advantage a lot of times. It's 5-on-4. And that's the reason that transition offense works, is because somebody got beat down the court and it's 5-on-4 or 4-on-3 or whatever. So those shots are always big advantage shots. And so, I've seen teams that are smaller, push the pace on offense, and then, press and pressure on defense to increase the pace. So now you have this big, slow team passing ahead, having to pass ahead. They're having to play in transition. And now they are shooting shots where their big's not in position to rebound, or, there's really no advantage. It's 2-on-3. They broke the press. They got an open shot. They're going to take it, even though we have rebounders there. In the half court, there's no way we get a rebound, but in this transition kind of flow state, everyone's kind of out of position and we're getting rebounds. And then, offensively push it down and try to get the same kind of quality shots and just shoot a better field goal percentage. So I think that's a big one when you're smaller. What else popped into your head as I was speaking there?
I was actually just thinking of kind of an anecdote on my own of running into a team like that. I think it was like my second year. We were in the playoffs and we had the 4 seed, so we ended up getting a bye the first round, and then we had a home game, right? And this team came in that was the 5 seed, and we kind of looked them on film, and they weren't very big. Like, their biggest girl was maybe like 5'9", and I had like 5'10", 6 foot, like a 5'11". I had some size, right? So I'm like, okay, we can definitely get the ball inside and do some things, and they played so fast, and they pressed, and they just went up and down so fast, and we just couldn't handle it. Like, we couldn't even get into the things that we wanted to get into because they played so fast and they pressed us so hard that it was just so disruptive. Even when we would come down, we were so sped up that instead of taking our time and getting the ball to the 6 foot big who had like a girl 3 or 4 inches shorter on her, we'd force up a dumb shot, or we'd rush to get her the ball, and it was like, and they ended up beating us by like 15 or 18. And that was kind of one of the first times I realized, whoa, like there's a huge advantage. I'm not saying I never realized it before, but I think there's sometimes as a coach, you're like, okay, I see where the big advantage is in playing like this, right? If you can press and be under control and push the offense, those teams that are a little slower, like, they're probably going to struggle because they like to play at a certain pace. And if they don't play at that pace, it throws off their whole rhythm. And it threw us off.
Totally. I think teams that have tall players, like, they want to get into their stuff, right? They want to get into their set that sets the little back screen for the big to get it in the post or the cross screen or whatever. And when you're not getting into your stuff, then yeah, I can see the post player not touching the ball very much, and that's frustrating. So, the team that I think of that does this so well is Clovis North. Clovis North, I would say they normally play with like a 6'3" big that can shoot, or a 6'4" big that can shoot, and then it's just a bunch of little guys, and essentially it's a three ball. So that's something we didn't really talk about, but essentially these small teams are shooting, 40% from three in a game, where on the other end, when you have a big, you're hoping they're shooting like, 55% or 60% from the field, which 40% from three is 60% from two. So that's where a small team can win by shooting threes. And even if you have the height advantage as far as getting the ball inside and to a post that can score. So yeah, so when you have smaller players, like you said earlier, getting those paint touches is huge. So you can get those kick out threes, because those are like the highest quality threes that are coming inside out, drive and kick. So it just takes some great spacing with a bunch of quick players to create the space, to be able to make the drives, get the paint touch, and get layups too. And just not to go on another tangent, but like free throws, right? If you have a smaller team, and maybe this isn't true, maybe it's the opposite. Maybe if you have a bigger team, you should shoot more free throws. But if you have a smaller team, I'm telling my guys to get in there and shot fake and just get to the free throw line, because I think free throws are valuable, and I think that's a strategy worth testing is, try to get to the free throw line.
I will say, I think it's hard a lot of the times for guards to get into that mindset of getting in there, pump faking, and getting people off their feet. Like, I feel like most of the time the teams that shoot a lot of free throws and the players that shoot a lot of free throws are the bigs, because they're constantly banging down low, like they're catching and they're trying to go up strong and they're getting hit and they're finishing. And it's rare to come across a guard who can get in there and give that up fake and is smart enough to then jump up and go into you and take the contact, right? Like, a lot of times we want to get in there and be an acrobat, or we want to get in there and kick out, or if we do fake and they jump, we turn and reverse pivot and kick it out instead of like going up and kicking in and taking the contact. I'm not saying it's never done, but it's not as common as we'd like to think. But I think you're right from a basketball standpoint of like, what's the smart play? Yeah, if you got four quick guards, they can get in there and jump stop. Most players will leave their feet, and you should be able to get to the free throw line a lot if you do that. But I just, for whatever reason, I think for guards, it's hard to mentally think about that. They're just like, oh, I'm going to shoot a three, or if I get in the paint and I'm contested, I'm going to kick it out,
Yeah, and I think too, like, that good teams don't jump, right? Like, if I'm 6'7" and here comes a 5'7" guy and he's in there, I'm not going to even try to jump to block a shot. I'm just going to wall up and probably get a piece anyways. But I think that's a good team. That's a good big. That's a smart big. Like, a lot of teams will jump. I still believe that at the high school level, at least, a lot of players are like hungry for that block or whatever reason, or maybe just not disciplined, so they'll go for it. So, okay. So let's go ahead now and go into the final segment. Which is better? What is better, being a small, fast team or a tall, slow team? And like, historically, what, like, in your opinion, what do you think is better? Not historically. Let's just go straight to your opinion. What do you like?
Okay. I was going to give both, but
okay.
I can
go. You can go both. Yeah, go both. Yeah,
okay.
Go both.
Okay. So I think historically, if you're looking at like, the last 60, 70 years, whatever, like, bigger teams have been better. I think if you look at it from like NBA level, even down through college and probably high school, like, most of the teams that are winning state or winning the national championship or winning, whatever, that are perennial powerhouses, they always have good bigs that can defend and rebound and block shots and do stuff. And for a long time, bigs ruled the game, right? And I still think now in high school, even and probably even in college, like, the best teams are the ones with at least a couple really good bigs. You look at like the last couple years, like a guy like Zach Edey for Purdue, who just dominated, right, and took them to the finals. And I don't know, I could probably find plenty of other examples too. I do think though that it's starting to change a little bit because of the way that the game is being played, and that if you've got like 3 or 4 really good shooters, having a smaller team can be advantageous. And definitely, I don't know, the style of play in the NBA has geared towards that. They're just shooting so many more threes, and I think there's somewhat of a trickle-down effect to the other levels where players are wanting to shoot more threes and not play traditional inside basketball. So if you told me I have to pick one, for high school, I think I'm still going to take the bigs. Just because I don't think most high school players are skilled enough to shoot threes at that high of a percentage. But I think if you're talking at higher levels, like, you can see more teams getting away with being a shooting team. Like, I don't know. I remember back in the day, everyone saying like, you can't win a championship shooting threes. And then the Warriors come out and won like 3 or 4, right? So, but that's because they have guys like Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and, Kevin Durant. Those are once in a lifetime type players. Most levels, you're not going to get that. Like in high school and even in college, most guys are not. You're not going to get a team full of Steph Currys. So I think I'd still probably take a bigger team. I just think there's a little bit more you can do with it. But I think you can win being small too.
I think that was well said. I don't have too much to add to that because I would have to agree that height is where it's at because of the fact that you got to rebound, you got to guard, and to me, it's like the height has more of a ceiling or a higher ceiling, right? There, like you can develop height to be a guard, you can develop height to shoot from the perimeter, and the truth is this, and it's that you need a blend of both for sure. Like it does not matter like how tall your point guard is essentially, like you need a point guard that can be a point guard, like it doesn't really matter. The size on the point guard does not matter. I mean, is there a 6-foot point guard that's better than, Ben Simmons at how tall he is? Yeah, there's a lot of them. So it doesn't matter. Like even in the post, like, is Charles Barkley so much worse of a post player than another player? So, I think you need a blend of both. But yeah, I would stick with you on the height over speed. And if worse comes to worse, I'm playing zone, baby.
Yeah. I think what it really boils down to in a lot of this is how do you, what are the skill sets, right? Because if you got a bunch of smaller, like really quick players, but none of them can shoot, like you're going to have a tough time. Yeah, you're in a lot of trouble, right? So what are the skill sets? And then how much can you develop them? As much as we, as coaches, want to say like, okay, we can develop players, and we absolutely can. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to downplay this. Like coaches develop their players, especially at the high school level and younger. But if a kid isn't willing to work on their own jump shot on their own, like they're only going to become so much of a good shooter just coming to practice, right? So if you just don't have the personnel, you've got to find whatever works best for you. And I think the main thing is find the blend. And maybe one year you're a little bit bigger and one year you're a little bit smaller, and find the offense and the style of play that fits you best. I've had years where I've pressed a bunch, and I've had years where I didn't press at all because we were just big and a little slower, so it wasn't worth it. And it's okay to kind of go back and forth. You can still have your main identity, but not need to necessarily like be so rigid that you're not willing to adapt to the time or what you've got at the moment.
Well said. I hope you guys liked today's episode. If you did and you're watching on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. If you're listening on an audio platform, you can follow us there as well. This is the Pass First Podcast. My name's Augie. My co-host is Alex Angle, and we will see you guys in the next episode.